The EFF leader, Julius Malema, says nothing has changed in the last 3 decades of democracy. Addressing thousands of the Red Beret loyalists at the party manifesto launch, Malema says there's nothing to celebrate because just like before 1994, the wealth of the country is still in the hands of white people. Delivering the EFF's manifesto, Malema reiterated his party's stance that political power without economic power is meaningless. The party says amongst its promises, if given a chance to double social grants for the elderly and also introduce a graduate fund for unemployed young people, it'll do so. The third largest party in parliament launched its election manifesto for the 2024 general elections at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal earlier.
Now onwards, we are going to stop at the Union Building. I present to you the People Manifesto of the EFF. This is the weapon that will be used against the enemy of our revolution.
The Red Beret leader Julius Malema delivering his party's blueprint for the upcoming general elections. Addressing party members, Malema says in the past 3 decades, nothing has changed for ordinary South Africans.
30 years ago, in 1994, the wealth of the country was concentrated in the hands of white majority. 30 years later, the wealth of South Africa is still in the hands of the white minority. 30 years ago, in 1994, more than 90% of informal settlement dwellers, abahlali basemjondolo, were black Africans. And 30 years later, today, informal settlement dwellers still look like me and you. There are no white people in informal settlement.
The EFF leader vowed to increase, amongst others, the social grants to 4,180 rands monthly, while the party will also introduce graduate funds.
Comrades, we are going to increase social grants. We want Abu Gogo and Abu Mkulu to get 4,180 per month. We want veterans to get 4,220 per month. We want child support grant to be increased to 1,200 per month. We want disability, care dependency, and foster care increased. The EFF will introduce a graduate fund. Anyone who get matric and can't get a job will get 1,000 rand. Anyone who get a degree, can't get a job, will get 3,000 rand. Anyone who get an honors without a job will get 4,000 rand.
Malema also vowed that it will only take his party 6 months to end load shedding and 9 million jobs while at it.
EFF is going to create 9 million jobs through stopping load shedding, because we believe that through industrialization we can create jobs, but we cannot industrialize if we still have load shedding.
On education, the party still stands by its position that education will be a reality under the EFF. Malema urged South Africans to give the EFF a chance, as the party has not been given a clear chance to prove itself.
We are not part of the 1994 elite pact. We are not part of CODESA. We don't owe the Boers anything. We never went to CODESA with the Boers. We are a new generation with our own challenges. And therefore, when we say now, we must not apologize, because we never promised white people that we'll never take the land.
Nhlanhla Khatlhane, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, let's speak now to Guhle Zwagala. Cape Peninsula University of Technology political party brand analyst. A very good evening to you, Mr. Zwagala, and thank you so much for speaking to us. You heard what the CIC promised people of South Africa should his party be ushered into the union buildings. That speech alone, especially given against the picture that he drew of a South Africa 30 years on of broken promises where there is no freedom, he says, without water, flushing toilets, proper roads, people unable to move freely in the streets. And the promise of these grants that he's promising, not only for the elderly, graduates fund, are these a reality?
Good evening to your viewers. He calls them commitments, not necessarily promises. I think that leaves much to be desired. That statement in its own, saying that they are a party that's in opposition. They are the second biggest opposition. But I suppose under this current environment, under the political, got an imminent election coming. So I suppose these are good on paper, but when people are given an opportunity to govern, I think that's when we'll really know whether the EFF, are they really promising, or are they really committing to their manifesto. And certainly I'm not sure what further grants can do to better uplift South African society. The old adage goes, we should rather teach the men how to fish. So I'm not sure whether further social welfare grants are any solution to our societal problems, particularly unemployment.
If a new government replaces the ANC, and I'm talking specifically here political party with a bi-coalition, say the EFF for instance, they would be inheriting what many have pointed out is a government with depleted coffers. So how would they make good of these promises? Where would the money come from? And I'd like to look at one of the commitments that the CIC also made, that of giving land for free, and mostly to women. Did you even get a sense of how this would be achieved, not only in terms of the use of the land, how it will be allocated, but the scale?
Yeah, look, what's missing under the land question are the modalities of this land redistribution. However, I think that bridge can be crossed at a later stage. The issue of land is quite a serious matter. It's premised on the principle of redressing. So I suppose the modalities in terms of how would this land be redistributed, that answer can be questioned later. But fully agree with the EFF stance that if we are willing as a country to redress in all other sectors, now we all understand why do we then need to redress, particularly in the private sector. But the issue of land redistribution is quite critical. The hows and the who's, I argue that question can be asked a bit later. But certainly, our people are really confined, especially when you talk about residential land. They're confined into small spaces, into conditions. Our people live in squalor due to lack of land. So if you can just start with residential land, urban land, business for people to start businesses and create jobs and create employment, the first and foremost, land needs to be redistributed. Yes, their manifesto is a bit silent on the how part, but the principle is that we need to redress, and the first point of departure there would then be the issue of land.
I think it is important to look at it, because if we're talking about commitments, people are going out there to vote. For instance, the ANC government has been accused of improperly implementing or not seeing through what they've done, buying land for black farmers. If we look at the practicalities of what have been the impediments, for instance, if we look at what is said to be the malfunctioning or mismanagement of state veterinary service. Last year alone, in the past couple of years, we've seen lots of farmers lose land, stock because of disease outbreaks. The inability to prevent and manage that. How are we going to deal with some of these practicalities? Is it because we are failing to comply with what our trade partners are looking for in terms of requirements, or are we simply lacking support for particularly commercial farmers who are black?
The latter there, really. Black people have been farming for literally centuries. The black people have been largely subsistence farmers, right? Now, to penetrate farming for commercial purposes, obviously, the government has an obligation to support those farmers, and the element of corruption has unfortunately infiltrated that space as well. But the point is that farmers should be supported for commercial purposes. The skill is not an issue. Even the commercial farmers, each and every farm that I can argue, behind its produce, behind it thriving, it's largely black people that are doing the actual farming, that are working the land. So the skill is not an issue. But historically, black people have been subsistence farmers. But for commercial purposes, there's even an issue of sabotage. There are certain black farmers that don't have route to market. So if you're farming certain produce or whatever produce, you need route to market. You need shelf space. And that's where route to market is then not open to black farmers. Hence, they will then be deemed to be failing. So it's a whole systematic issue. So like farmers, black farmers in particular, they need to be supported because skill, as I argue, is certainly not an issue. But if the sabotage is inherent in the system, as I'm saying, whatever produce or whatever you farm, if you're not able to get it to the final end user, to the final consumer, you're doomed to fail. So there are those technicalities where black farmers are then seen to be less capable. But they've been farming for centuries, literally.
You spoke about corruption, which has been a major issue, particularly when we look at dysfunctional local municipalities and the growing levels of lack of service delivery. Part of the suggestions in order to deal with joblessness, for instance, Julius Malema was speaking about the need to open factories outside of Johannesburg, given the growing levels of overpopulation. Migration, we know, has been, in fact, a problem that has long been predicted about 20 years ago. What should be the policy changes there? The ANC has been promising a human settlement that will see development in rural areas. But yet it seems like nothing really has been done about it. What can the EFF do to improve on that policy stance?
Look, honestly, if you look at the ANC's policies, they're largely intact, right? They're very appealing. However, the implementation thereof leaves much to be desired. So the EFF's suggestion of industrializing, it's nothing that is contrary to what the ruling party has on paper as far as policy is concerned. But I think to create jobs, the EFF, President Malema was very emphatic on the issue of industrializing. And I think if we want to create jobs rather than handing out social welfare grants for long-term gains, we need to go back to industrialization. We've seen countries like China, how they've combated unemployment through industrializing. And I also think that Malema has a point he calls it decentralizing the economy. So Gauteng is now the center of the economy, but that doesn't help. I mean, the province is congested, highly populated, and to compensate people for developing rural areas, I think that is a very appealing idea, rather than everyone flocking into that city in particular and overpopulating it. So I think that there's merit to that argument to say the country needs to industrialize in order to create jobs, in order to build a very strong economy. Because let's be honest, we are under a very volatile economy. So the implementation, there's certain alignment between Malema's utterances and what the ANC has on paper. As I was saying again, the implementation becomes an issue. So if we can get a government that can actually implement policy, perhaps we could move the country and its economy forward.
Thank you so much for your time, Guhle. Zwagala is a political and party brand analyst from the Cape Peninsula University.